Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to talk about my June and July wrap-up. Gonna give a brief review of everything that I read in both of those months. I've been really enjoying doing the 2 months at once wrap-up so far this year. We're gonna pretend like it's not because I've been behind on my wrap-ups, but I actually have been liking compressing these videos into 2 at once, so that's what we're doing for June and July as well. So in June, I finished 7 books for just over 2,400 pages, and my average rating for those 7 books was a 4.29, which is amazing. So I had 1 3-star read in the month of June, 1 4-star read, 2 4.25-star reads, 1 4.5, and 2 5s. So really nothing to complain about at all there. I don't have all of the books in physical copy because at least one of them was from the library. Actually, I got one from the library on audiobook, and I actually got a couple of them from the library physically, so June was a great month for that. And then the lowest rated book that I rated 3 stars, we have put it in one of our little free libraries. But without further ado, let's get into the June books. So beginning as usual with the lowest rated book and moving to the highest, my book that I finished in June that was 3 stars was Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. And so you've actually seen me talk about this one already in my best and worst books of the year so far by month. So if you're interested in that video as well, I can leave that link in the description. But this was my lowest rated book from the month of June. This was a book that I bought myself and I was interested in, and it was my pick for a book club with my friends. So it was kind of unfortunate that I didn't end up loving it, but Green Teeth follows our main character, and her name is Jenny Greenteeth, and she is a lake monster. She dwells within this small lake within the British Isles. This is either in England or Scotland. I don't remember if it specifically said that this took place in Scotland, but it was definitely giving like Loch Ness Monster vibes in terms of like a mythical creature who lives in a lake in the British Isles. And Jenny is kind of going about her business when there is a village on the shores of her lake that ends up dumping a witch into her lake as punishment, and Jenny decides that instead of eating the witch, she's actually going to save her. And Maisie is driving me absolutely crazy right now because she won't stop clawing at the chair. Anyway, it turns out that there is a darkness and a dark force that has moved into the town that slowly turned them against the witch, and Jenny decides to help her and try and drive this power out of her town. And I think that in the end, this is something that had potential, and I think that a lot of people will still like it, but for me, it just didn't do anything in particular to draw me in. I didn't love the direction that the story went. I did like some of the inspirations and the settings, but aside from that, the characters and the emotional storylines, they fell a bit flat for me, so that's where it just landed at a 3-star, where I liked it, but I obviously wasn't going to reread it because we have given it away already, and it was just an okay book. Next up, we have my 1 4-star read for the month of June, and this was my audiobook from the library. So this was Finley Donovan Digs Her Own Grave by El Cosimano. And this one was a very enjoyable read. I have really liked every book in this series so far, and I don't blame people if they have dropped off because book 4 kind of wrapped up a lot of big storylines, and by the time we got to book 4, I was still having a lot of fun, but I didn't think that books 3 and 4 were as strong as books 1 and 2. I think that the storylines were going on a bit long, but a lot of them did get wrapped up, and we had a bit of a reset going into book 5, and we had a smaller scope with slightly lower stakes. And I really enjoyed that. I think that by this point we are so invested in the characters and we just like love following them for who they are, that it was the perfect time to do a story like this. So I thought that it was really solid. I really like the characters, like I said, so I was very much on board for this slightly smaller scale story, and I'm glad that some of the plot points have kind of reset because the complexities and the stakes were getting a bit convoluted by the time we finished book 4. And I think it was a good decision. 4 stars, really solid. I'm sure I will listen to the next book as well because these are always just fun. They're very fun for me. Next up, we have the first out of 2 books in June that I rated 4.25 stars, and that was Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. I probably said that wrong. I didn't look at it again until now, and I forgot her last name. But this was a book that I checked out physically from the library, and then when I was finished with it, I ended up going out to buy it. For one, because this is an absolutely beautiful book that I had been talking myself in and out of buying from the bookstore for like a year or however long it's been since this came out. And second of all, because I did really end up liking it. Like, obviously, if I got it from the library and then I did not like it, I wouldn't have bought it. But I thought that it was a pretty good compromise to get it for free first. We love using the library, and once I figured out that I enjoyed it, then we got this gorgeous book to go on my shelf. And this book is a very whimsical, kind of interesting setting. We follow our main character who is just about ready to take over this magical pawn shop from her father. Her father is retiring, and it is literally the eve. She wakes up in the morning, the pawn shop is going to be hers. Her father is going to be retired. And when we meet her and she wakes up in the morning ready to take over the pawn shop, her father is gone. The shop is destroyed. She feels like they've either been robbed or her father has been kidnapped. She doesn't know where he is, but she discovers that something very, very valuable has been stolen, something that they were keeping but didn't necessarily own. So people from another world, this pawn shop is sort of like a portal between worlds, and people from her world will be coming to look for this artifact. So if she cannot find her father and find out what happened and restore this item, then they'll kind of be in deep trouble. So this is a very, very interesting book because based on the synopsis, I thought that this was going to be a magical shop that existed on Earth. And it sort of does, but you can only find it if you need it, and it doesn't really exist on Earth. Like, once you pass through into the shop, you can get out the front door again onto Earth, but you really aren't still in the same world. This is much more of a portal fantasy. There is an entire other world that exists behind this door, which is what I did not realize. And I was very intrigued by that when I realized it and as we developed it. And it's also very, very surreal. Like, for a lot of this, what is keeping you grounded is the characters and their interactions with each other and their goals, like the emotional goals, the fact that she's looking for her father, trying to figure out truths about her family and trying to bring this important artifact back. But what is not grounding you is the setting. The setting is totally like it breaks your brain. Like, anything could happen. It's very much dreamlike and, quite frankly, like impossible, but it's also not explained. Like, it's not a hard magic system. It's very soft. So it was fascinating. And the reason that I gave it 4.25 is because earlier on, I definitely thought this could be 4.5 or 5. I think that it got a little bit lost in the sauce of like the setting. It was still very strong though. It was some of the pacing and some of the dwelling on things that I thought if it was paced just a little bit tighter, a little bit better, then maybe it could have been a 5-star for me. But I think this is really, really unique and really cool. So I still thought that it was awesome, but I would definitely recommend this to anybody who likes it's much more fantasy than I originally thought. So it's not really like a grounded real world whimsical fantasy. It's much more surreal than that. So if that appeals to you, then you should definitely check this out. The second book that I gave 4.25 stars in the month of June was The Maniac by Benjamin Labatut. And this is much like his other book, When We Cease to Understand the World, this is sort of like scientific fiction. This follows mostly the life of John von Neumann, and it is both historically accurate while also taking the liberties of telling a story. Like it is written like a novel. And it also, like, it follows the life of John von Neumann, but it follows it from a lot of other perspectives. The people that knew him, the people that surrounded him in the scientific community. It kind of explores his contributions to science throughout the 20th century, and then the work that he did with computers that kind of gave birth to the era of AI. And then eventually this book does get into the 21st century, and it talks about like AIs that were developed, and it talks about people that play the game of Go and how humans that play it were pitted against AIs and computers that were taught to play this, and it talks a little bit about the same with chess players. And so that's kind of the progression of the entire book. That end part is definitely set up by what we look at in 20th century scientists and John von Neumann and everything about that, but the bulk of the book is about von Neumann, and that was definitely my favorite part. He was kind of terrifying because he definitely had a level of genius that was not fettered by like a moral compass. It's very much like we were so focused on whether or not we didn't consider whether we should. That's like my favorite line to sum up things like this. But because I think I said that about When We Cease to Understand the World as well. So shout out to Jurassic Park for that very succinct summary. But yeah, I don't even really want to say too much more about it than that, because I think that the way that Benjamin Labatut writes and the way that he like tells these stories in his novels, both of them so far, is just so engaging that you have to experience it for yourself. But I can tell you without a doubt that it is very, very interesting. But yeah, the 4.25 is mostly because I didn't really love the final section of this book as much. And it's not even because it wasn't good or interesting. It was just that I didn't enjoy reading it. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that it has a very helpless feeling towards like a human going up against an AI in one of these games that humans have been mastering for like thousands of years. I understand what he was saying in terms of themes, and it was definitely getting his message across, but I hated reading that part. So it's just my own feelings, but definitely would recommend this, and would recommend When We Cease to Understand the World. My 1 4.5-star read for the month of June was The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar, and this is a novella that I was very excited about reading, very intrigued by ever since hearing that Amal El-Mohtar had something new coming out after This Is How You Lose the Time War, because I really loved that novella. And so this is something quite different from the Time War, and it is like you can still definitely see the author's stamp, I think, because The River Has Roots is a story about sisters and a story about like this family that lives right on the edge of Ferry, essentially, and this river runs from Ferry into like the human world, but it can change directions. But the river is on their property, and these trees that have magical properties are kind of their responsibility. These sisters sing to the trees, and they keep them healthy, and they keep up the relationship with this magic. And so this is obviously very short, so I don't want to say too much, but one of the sisters is kind of in love with a being that comes from fairy and ends up getting into a situation where she is kind of not interested in a human suitor, and he is very upset about that. And so he kind of tries to get back at this sister for being interested in someone from fairy rather than him. And that's all I'll say. But I found this to be beautifully written, very interesting magic system called Grammar, and a kind of beautiful story about the love of sisters. And it was, I don't know, it was just a very, very nice time for me. Like, I just had such a good time experiencing it, and it wasn't perfect. Like, it wasn't an automatic favorite, hence 4.5 stars, but it was just also wonderful. It was sad at times, but I thought it was wonderful. My 2 5-star reads from the month of June are 2 that you have also already seen me talk about in my best and worst of the year video, but these are definitely 2 favorites of the entire year so far. And the first one is Persuasion by Jane Austen. So a lot of people probably don't need to hear me say what this is about, because of course it is a very well-known and very beloved book. But this is my second time reading Persuasion. The first time I read it was in 2019, I think, and I did really enjoy it then, but I loved it even more on this reread. I bumped it up from like a 4-ish star to a 5, and Anne is one of my favorite Jane Austen characters. Pride and Prejudice, I still think might be my favorite Jane Austen, but Persuasion is definitely up there. It's probably tied with it. I love Anne and Captain Wentworth, and I love the way that this second chance romance unfolds. This is like the OG second chance romance, obviously. And one thing that I really like about this book is, for one, how much I love both of the main characters, but also, 2, is how much I think that there are other really good characters surrounding them, and that includes the ridiculousness of Anne's father and her sisters, but it also includes like genuinely good people and good characters that are friends with them and are like good influences. And I think that that's also a nice thing to have in Jane Austen's kind of social commentary, is that there are going to be some good people as well. Like, it's fun to read about the ridiculous antics of people who are so concerned with like social niceties, but it's also nice to have like friends for our characters, like friends that are genuinely just good. And so there's a lot to love about this, but that's just a few things, and yeah, this is for sure a favorite for me. Then my other 5-star read from the month of June was actually the first book that I read in June, so we started off very strong, and if you are in our Discord, this will not be a shock to you whatsoever, and that is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. So this was a book that Ben heard about before I did, and he picked it up from the bookstore and he read it and was like really enjoying it, and other people in the Discord had kind of started to talk about it as well while he was reading it. And this was an instance where I would have gotten to this eventually because it also intrigued me, but I just thought, like, why, there's no rules saying that I can't just drop everything and read it right now. So that was basically what I did shortly after Ben read it. And this was so good. I was so happy. Like, and everybody in the Discord, well, not everybody, but a lot of people in the Discord started reading it and loving it as well. And me and Ben like to laugh because people were thanking me for recommending it to them, even though it was Ben that read it first and then recommended it to me. So I got some credit that I didn't deserve for bringing this. I guess I was just louder, I don't know. But this novel follows a couple of different timelines. We begin in a time that takes place like around 10 or 15 years before our main timeline, but the events that we're centering are the end of the reign of an emperor. And this empire that we're following, an emperor will rule for 24 years. And if that reign ends peacefully, the emperor needs to step down at 24 years. So in our present day timeline, we are dealing with this changeover in power. However, there was a rebellion a certain amount of time ago, and that is where we kind of begin our timeline. We see things that have taken place in the past to kind of give us some context and set the scene where this emperor's entire rule hasn't been peaceful. So it is ending peacefully, but we needed to know some of that other information. And when this emperor is stepping down, it is time for contestants to compete for their chance at the throne. So we have a series of trials, a series of like physical fights to gather points, and whoever wins all of these trials in this competition will be the new emperor. But as we get rolling on this, a murder takes place of one of the contestants, and that murder must be solved while the trials and everything are still going on. So there's a lot of political intrigue, a lot of danger. We have a murder mystery, all of this combined with like really interesting set pieces and set building and world building, and just like really well written characters, good pacing. It's all so fun and interesting. Like I had a blast reading this, and so I'll basically just recommend it to any fantasy reader who will listen to me. If there's gonna be a new release that you read this year, make it this one. Okay, now it's time to get into the books that I read in July. So in July, I finished 5 books for 2,600 pages, which is 2 less books, but like 200 more pages. And the culprit for that will become very clear because one of these books is quite chunky. But my average rating for those 5 books was a 4.0 even, which obviously is nothing to sneeze at. But I did have 1 2.5-star read in the month of July, then 2 4-star reads, 1 4.5-star, and 1 5-star. So there was one book that was bringing the average down a little bit, one book that I really didn't love, but aside from that, a really, really enjoyable month. So once again, to start with that lowest rated 2.5-star read, we have another book that I do not have physically because we actually sold it. This was a new release, and this was My Friends by Frederick Bachman. This one also showed up in my best and worst books video because this was my least favorite book that I read in July, but I have enjoyed Frederick Bachman in the past. I really, really enjoyed Beartown and Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, and I liked Anxious People as well, but it wasn't like a favorite. And then My Friends it didn't end up really working for me. This unfortunately just fell into a trap of, for me, it felt like Bachman was constantly trying to have an emotional gut punch. Like every page, every sentence was quotable. It didn't feel to me like the way that real people talked. And it had an odd combination of either being that type of writing and that type of dialogue, or it was like very juvenile, very immature dialogue, which is fine in that sense because we are following teenagers for a large bulk of the book, and I'm totally fine with teenagers behaving realistically in terms of like they are going to be immature at times, but it was very difficult to reconcile both of those types of writing and dialogue into the same characters all at the same time. Like they just didn't feel like real people, and therefore I had a very difficult time having any emotional connection. So I did have other points in the book where there was a few interactions between friends that were older, like at a later point in their life, where it did make me emotional, and I did really enjoy those kind of excerpts. And like, he still managed to make me tear up, but overall, I think that the impact of his writing was lost when he tries to really do too much. So that's kind of where this 2.5 comes from, because a lot of people really love this book, and I didn't think that it was bad necessarily, but for my own enjoyment, he was constantly undermining himself with all of these quotable lines, and I just couldn't do it. So, and I didn't DNF it, I finished it, but in terms of like the impact that he wanted to have, it just was not working for me. Next up, we have my first 4-star read out of 2 for the month, and this was the very first book that I read in July, which was 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent, and this is a novella that I'm not sure where exactly it takes place in the chronological timeline in comparison with The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I'm pretty sure this takes place before that book, but I had it recommended to me to read this between the first and second novels, so that is what I did. And I thought that this novella was really well done. We follow a girl whose village has been cursed by a god, and her village is dying. People are getting sick, and then they kind of very slowly wither away. And she is someone who always had to reckon with death from a young age, because she was kind of terminally ill and she knew that she wouldn't live a super long time. But she is also someone who loves science and loves research, and she has taken it upon herself to try and find a cure for what is plaguing her village. And when she kind of comes up with a new idea, she realizes that there is a vampire who lives like on the outskirts. The village doesn't bother him and he doesn't bother them, but she realizes that she has ideas involving vampire blood, using that to try and cure this illness. So she makes her way out to this manor house and she tries to make a deal with this vampire, and things kind of go from there. But I thought that Carissa Broadbent just did a really good job in this one of the scope that she chose for a novella, because that's a huge thing that kind of makes or breaks my enjoyment of a novella, is whether it felt like it went too fast or whether it felt like it was trying to do too much in such a short amount of time. So I think she chose a really good length and scope for the right impact. I really liked our characters, Lilith and Vale, and I really liked the way their relationship developed and the stubbornness and willpower of our main character and the way that she was fighting for the people that she loved. This was just really enjoyable, and so it definitely made me look forward to going into the second full-length novel. Now, my next 4-star read from the month of July is quite different, although it does still deal with death. And that was Lincoln in the Bardau by George Saunders. This was a Man Booker Prize winner back in I don't know, the 2000s? I don't really know.
I don't know. I'll Google it.
I want to say 2006. Tell me if I'm right.
2017.
No!
Pretty close.
All right, this book's way newer than I thought it was. I don't even know where I was before I started guessing the year, but this is a Man Booker Prize winner in a year. And this follows a really interesting mix of real historical sources with totally fictionalized novel writing. So George Saunders essentially took the real historical event of the fact that Abraham Lincoln's son Willie passed away of a fever when he was only 10 years old, and it essentially takes that and makes it into a story about the soul or the ghost of Willie Lincoln as he is in this cemetery and in the Bardau, as you call it, and there are a lot of other souls and other ghosts in this place as well. And we get to kind of follow what happens when he is in this place after he has passed, where it's very surreal, it's very bizarre, and it's definitely fantastical. It has a lot of themes of how things do not go well for like a young person or a child if they refuse to pass on beyond the Bardau. Whereas on the other hand, there are a ton of adults of totally different walks of life that are all here kind of trying to get young Willie's soul to pass on, but he doesn't want to let go. He wants to stay and see his father. But it's written in this very interesting way where some chapters are kind of written in like excerpts of journal articles and excerpts of sources, like they are quoted. The beginning of the book deals with a party that Abraham and Mrs. Lincoln throw, and there are real historical accounts of what was thought of this party at the time as their son lay sick. And when we kind of get into the Bardau, it's almost written like dialogue, it's almost written like a play, but not quite, where each character is it's not written in like general prose. It's like different characters and ghosts will speak and then it will be attributed to them. And it is so different from anything else that I've ever read. It's really fascinating. So I think that I wasn't necessarily prepared enough. I think that if I reread this down the line, my rating of it might go up. But there was so much to think about and so much to sit on that I still really enjoyed it. So like 4.0 stars for this is just that it was still a really solid book, but it was also kind of hard to grapple with at times. But I can definitely see why it won the Booker Prize, because it is so kind of revolutionary in terms of writing a novel this way. Next up, we have my 4.5 star read of the month of July, and that is A Witch's Guide to Magical Inkeeping by Sangu Mandana. And people say that this is the companion novel to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by the same author. And I have not looked into whether the author has said this or not, but it struck me as odd because I can totally see why from the outside you would think this, but the organization of witches in the other book seems very different from like the Guild of Witches and Wizards that we see in this book. So I'm kind of like, okay, did they take place in the same world or are they slightly different? I'm not really sure. But in this book, we follow our main character, Sarah, who was once one of the really bright up-and-coming witches in Britain, but when she was around 15 years old, she ended up resurrecting her great aunt, who basically had a heart attack at their inn, and Sarah basically sacrificed most of her magic in order to resurrect her great aunt because she had an extraordinary amount of magic, enough to cast this spell, but it kind of demanded a bit too much from her, and it was too much for her magic to replenish itself afterwards. So she resurrects her great aunt, but a resurrection spell is not legal, so she gets strictly reprimanded for that, and she loses her access to the guild. She's not allowed to go back to school there. And so basically Sarah has been living her life in the meantime for the last 15 years, running the magical inn with her great aunt, and they have formed this really, really heartwarming group of people that live there. But all of this time, it's not that Sarah doesn't enjoy her life, but she has had the goal of kind of regaining her magic, but she lost access to the resources that she would need to figure out how to do that. But in our present day timeline, when Sarah is around 30, she ends up like finding help from a source that she didn't expect to find it when a magical historian from the guild ends up visiting her inn, and she might actually be able to get his help. He does have access to these resources. So it was pretty much exactly everything that I hoped that it would be. I think that it did a really good job of balancing the coziness and the lightheartedness of the found family and a couple of different romantic storylines, with also the very slightly more serious nature of the goal of Sarah getting her magic back, while also talking about other serious themes like creating a place where you treat people well, where they belong, and how you can create your own family, and how if other people are treating you poorly, if you have a good support system behind you, you have somewhere to go back to, and things like that. So this was just thoroughly enjoyable, and I think that this is pretty equal with her other book, in terms of I really enjoyed both of them a lot. And I'm really glad that I read this in the summer, because it was just like a really nice and easy read after I read what my 5-star book was. But yeah, this was the perfect time for me to read this, I think, and it was awesome. Okay, so as I referred to, one of the books that I read this month was a super chunky one, and that was Told the Hounds by Stephen Erickson, which is book 8 in Malazan Book of the Fallen. So this was incredible. This is up there with like Memories of Ice and The Bone Hunters for me, that stick out automatically as my favorites of the series so far. The first half of this book was kind of slow. Things are still happening all the time, but this was definitely taking it slower in the first half, building up to something extraordinary in the second half. And I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who are reading the series. It's very hard to talk about this series in any type of detail without spoiling something, but we get to see a lot of threads that were laid down in Gardens of the Moon and earlier books in the series. It's actually kind of crazy reading this book, realizing how much has happened between book 1 and book 8, where he did so much groundwork so much earlier on for things that were not going to happen until this point in the series, and then you get to see how they play out and what all of that waiting was for, and it's really kind of wild. Yeah, so you get to see a lot of things come back around, and you just have to kind of have faith that, like, I have faith that he is going in a direction where I'll love reading this book. And in the second half, like, I still enjoyed it in the first half, but in the first half I wouldn't have known that it was going to be a favorite of the series, where in the second half so much was happening, and in a way that I loved. So I think that's enough said, probably, because I can only stay vague for so long without starting to just sound vague for no reason. And not directly related to Told the Hounds, but it's very exciting that Broken Binding has put out information about their editions of books 4 to 6, which Ben and I will of course be purchasing, because books 1 to 3 are gorgeous and incredible, and we want to collect the entire series in, or at least the main 10 books, in editions that are really nice and go well together, since it's a favorite series for both of us. But yeah, that is it for all of the books that I finished in June and all of the books that I finished in July. So although each month featured one book that I could kind of point to that I didn't enjoy as much, aside from that, these were both really strong reading months for me. I've been having a pretty good reading year this year, I think. I've been enjoying a lot of what I've been reading, and if you have any thoughts on any of these books, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear from you, whether you agree with me on them or you don't. I'm always very interested to hear your thoughts. And as always, I will have my Discord with Ben and my socials down in the description if you're interested in any of that stuff. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!